This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome, I'm Doug Raymond, sitting in for Tom Campbell this week, and now it's time to get the correct spin on what's been going on in North Carolina, and time to introduce you to our panel of experts. They include John Hood, syndicated columnist, who has just released a new book on Governor Jim Martin, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, Connie Wilson, former legislator, and Rufus Edmisten, former Secretary of State and former Attorney General. This past week, our legislature adjourned their session, and we want to talk about those closing days. We also want to talk about the controversial bill that might spell the beginning of the end of political parties in our state. And as always, we're going to ask our panel to tell us something that we don't know. So let's get started. Following the passage of the state budget, it usually takes the legislature several weeks to tie up all those loose ends and adjourn, but there was little doubt that our lawmakers this year were ready to get home. This past week, they left lots on the table, but traditionally, those last-minute, closed-door, hectic meetings had them working hard to get passage on what Representative Bill Brawley described as the last train out of town. They finally adjourned at 4:18 a.m. Wednesday morning. And we want to ask about what they did and didn't do before they left. So question to all, give me your general thoughts on this legislative session. We'll start with John.
Well, Doug, I think there's a lot of different ways to describe the session, largely because they did so many different things. I mean, it wasn't pretty to look at, but a lot came out particularly towards the end of the session. But I think that the overriding theme didn't get as much attention, perhaps, as some of the more hot-button issues. I think the overriding theme was spending on public capital, on the physical plant of state and local government. Roads and bridges, a huge increase in road and bridge spending. If you include the bonds into the package, you're looking at schools, community colleges and universities. You're looking at water and sewer systems, parks, state buildings, repairs and renovations. They put another $150 million into repairs and renovations. I think that's the biggest story of the session, to be honest.
Chris, what will you take out of this session?
Again, I do agree with John that there's so many things that you could take a lot of them. I think a couple things are, to me, define the session. One is a session maybe of missed opportunity. I thought there was an agreement between a lot of conservatives, including Governor McCrory. We didn't need to have additional tax reductions after let the ones in 2013 take effect. They cut taxes again. It'll cost us money this year, but it's a significant amount of money in the second year of biennium. And most two-thirds of veteran teachers only got a $750 a year raise. So they made. I think they missed an opportunity to make some investments to catch up with some of the cuts they had made in previous years. The second thing, I think, is that we're careening toward a legislature whose process is out of control. The Democrats had a lot of problems with the way they ran the General Assembly. I think we saw this year even more, I think, behind the closed doors, switching bills at the last minute. There were a lot of people, I'm just not talking about the last couple of weeks, I'm talking about throughout the session. There was a lot of complaining I heard from both parties about the way the General Assembly was run.
Connie, you were there in the trenches for most of it. Give us your impressions.
You know, this, as Chris mentioned, was a very different year for process. And for the first time, they had a spring break. They had a July break. NCAA occurred, and we had a couple of days off there, snow days. And there weren't as many bills moving individually. Bills kind of got rolled up into big other bills, either the budget or technical corrections or just huge omnibus bills. So there's a change in the process and the flow that's going on right now, and that's putting much more power into the majority party's caucus, because that's where the debate's now really occurring. And so if there's something that you can get through the caucus, it makes it so much easier to get a bill passed, and it might get added to another bill. So I think we're seeing a tremendous change in process and in how the House and Senate are working, since we now have a new speaker. You know, this year, Speaker Moore versus Speaker Tillis before. The Senate and the House had to learn how to dance together differently this year.
Right. Rufus, your thoughts?
Well, let's note that Connie was there at 4:15 in the morning. Great
She
lobbyist.
gets the award.
The one thing I noticed, being an old hand at this lobbying business, is that this legislature didn't do anything much different than the Democrats. Some things never changed. They waited till the end to do all the dirty stuff, or the good stuff from your point of view. And secondly, though, I noticed something very different this time. It occurs to me, Doug, that many members would take an individual complaint from somebody, a constituent that's mad about something, walk over there, put a bill in, not think about the unintended consequences, and there you go with something that was statewide that could have terrible, terrible consequences. I heard that over and over again. Well, I'll go to the legislature. I'll get them to fix this for me. That's not what good legislation is. But now I will say one thing. The legislature did do what they said they would do. The Republican majority said, we will shrink government. They did. I also was amazed that my philosophy of what Republicanism is not meddling in local affairs. There was a tremendous amount of meddling in local affairs this time, which doesn't set very well with our local governments.
Now, Chris, before we wrap up this segment, I want to ask you, last week you talked about possible funding changes that would transfer money from public schools to charter schools. That didn't come to fruition. Do you think that's dead, or may we see it pop up next session?
Well, I was glad it didn't come to fruition, but sadly I think it'll pop up again next session, and the charter school advocacy groups are already lobbying to revive that next time. It actually was a heated debate in the Senate. It passed the Senate. I think it was 25-19, which is a closer vote than we normally see in the Senate, but it didn't manage to pass the House. I think it'll be a big issue in the short session. The big complaint from folks who are opposed to it is that it even includes some federal money that supports the federal lunch program that charter schools aren't required to provide. And I think that was one of the sticking points for some of the members of the House, even some Republicans.
Okay. We want to thank you for watching NC Spin, both on air and on YouTube. And here's a reminder that there's much more on our website at ncspin.com or on NC Spin on Facebook. You'll find video footage not seen anywhere else, perspective pieces from our panel, and, of course, a weekly column. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NCSpin on Facebook, or on Twitter at NCSpinTweets. When we come back, we'll find out if it's the beginning of the end for political parties in North Carolina.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
We now return to NC Spin.
On last week's NC Spin, we talked about the bill that changed North Carolina's primary elections to March 15th. But as always, the devil was in the details, and this bill that shifted our primaries also contained a provision that allowed the leaders of the two political parties in each house of the legislature to set up affiliated party committees that would essentially be parallel to and possibly circumvent contributions to the two major political parties in our state. Now, these committees would be able to give unlimited money directly to candidates. Now, promoters of the legislation said that would improve transparency, but many who opposed it, especially leaders of the Democrat and Republican parties, said that it would hasten the demise of their organization. Now, Rufus, this bill barely passed the State House due to the provision that some termed a poison pill, saying it essentially bypasses political parties. You've run statewide campaigns. You've been involved in state political parties. What's your opinion on this portion of that bill?
Well, about 11 times, Doug. Now, the one time I didn't make it, Governor Martin got me that time.
I heard there's a good book about it.
Oh, it's a good book. Oh, it's a great book. I can't wait to read it and see Governor Martin. Political parties seem to be in the way of most people. As I said, I ran 11 times. And the party is the thing that can get out the votes. Parties are essential to democracy, for democracy in my point of view, because they say what you represent. They're supposed to do things that individuals can't do, but we've seen an erosion of that. This is not the only time. What I'm telling you is, Doug, that I believe very sincerely that you are seeing the very rapid demise of political parties, because this is another effort of the General Assembly to be the dominant force in the separation of powers in North Carolina, because they're going to concentrate on their thing, electing legislators there. And the executive branch people, John, I don't know whether you'll agree with me or not, they're going to have a hard time raising money. The big boys are going to want to give the money to these apps, or whatever we call them, Chris. Are they apps? Close to it. And I think it is something that is a doozy.
Well, Connie, you know, this was tagged onto a bill for obvious reasons. We know the world of politics. But the blogosphere just blew up almost immediately when it came out. Were you expecting this kind of reaction to this? And what do you think was behind this move?
Well, I think, obviously, money is extremely important to campaigns, and the price tag is so expensive at this point, and there's limited resources, and you're looking at 2016 where you have the presidential race, the U.S. Senate race, and these legislators are looking at how we're going to make sure we have our pot of money and enough money. So I think it was actually a very creative way. There's other ways they could have gone about doing this. They could have found a county party where they could have worked through, but this actually is more transparent. But I guess what I keep saying to myself is everything changes in the world. And the parties have to change also. To say that there's only one type of structure that's going to work forever and ever, I don't believe that's really accurate. So it's working, it's the leadership of both chambers working with the party to figure out how can we make sure that we have the resources to stay in the majority, whatever party's in the majority, and making sure that the grassroots are out there. But things are changing, and this is part of it. You have independent expenditure campaigns that have come in and changed how funding occurs.
Chris, I'm betting you have an opinion and a theory on this.
Well, part of it is, first of all, I'd like to agree with Rufus. It is a doozy. We get that over. I think this is a terrible idea. They made it only slightly less bad. First of all, we talked about process in the last segment. This came out of nowhere. It was stuck in a bill about elections. The change was made in a technical corrections bill. Reporters who were there didn't even know what was going on. They were voting on it. The original way this would have worked would literally have allowed one person or special interest or lobbyist to give the Speaker of the House $100,000 the night before a vote was up, or the President pro tem of the Senate the night before a vote on a bill that they cared about. Literally would have allowed that to happen. So it would be transparent, and we just know how bad things were. What they did, they put some restrictions. They won't let the legislative committees get money from from lobbyists or PACs during the session. They still can get unlimited money. They added a provision so the council will stay controlled by the governor, will have their own committees, but it basically allows politicians to get unlimited contributions for the first time. It's a joke. The contribution limits are now a joke. I just think it sets up another round of pay-to-play politics, and I agree with the folks on the right who oppose this, and many still do, and the folks on the left who opposed it.
John, I talked to folks that on the Republican side that referred to this as nothing more than an insurance policy. Someone said, oh, we may not even form these committees. It's just in case something were to happen with the state Republican Party in their case, we want to have something to fall back on. I mean, what do you think of that theory?
That is, I think, the origination of the idea. It may have gone into other directions. I didn't like the way the process happened either. I have some questions about the policy. But I think some of the opposition assumed that this was some elaborate ploy to involve the state party in primaries for legislators and so forth. That was not what was going on. I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen. I'm just saying that's not the motivation. The motivation is exactly what you were saying. I think that the heads of the caucuses, the House and the Senate, were concerned that donors might think, well, if the state party, the state Republican Party is having cash flow problems, and I write a check to the caucus account of the state party, will some of the money end up paying for something else? That's what this was about. And that's what they mean when they say today, this week, this is kind of a moot point because we have a new executive director. Dallas Woodhouse was hired as executive director. The chairman, Hassan Harnett, the two leaders of the legislature, Tim Moore, Phil Berger, they all got together and said, we're all on the same page. They're suggesting this is a moot point. Now, that doesn't mean this didn't create some opportunities for potential mischief. That was not the original purpose of it.
Now, we started this segment maybe with a little bit of overstatement or hype, saying, could this be the end of political parties? Each one of you, real quickly, give me your thoughts on, is this something that is a step toward the weakening and maybe the end of political parties in North Carolina, or maybe have they been weakened already and this is just part of the process?
I don't think they're very relevant today anyway, except for getting out the vote. And this is going to hasten a political party's death because you're only limited to a certain amount of money for political parties. This is wide open Wild West.
Connie?
I think it does have some negative impact on the parties, but I think we were going in that direction anyway. Voters and their voting patterns are very different. You have a much higher percentage of unaffiliated voters. So you can almost naturally say, you know, the importance of parties are already in their own because of voter trends changing. So this is part of it.
Chris?
I think independent expenditures have as much to do with the demise of political parties. When huge money is funneled to things that the candidates and the parties can't control, I don't think this will help. But remember, this will be controlled by politicians who are prominent members of those parties. So I think it's a loss for political parties, probably not as dramatic. I think it's a loss for our democracy and our open process. And again, I'm worried about the pay-to-play politics part.
Well, Chris almost had it right until the end where he got goofed up. But this is independent expenditures are the real threat to political parties and campaigns and have been for several cycles.
And I think we've all seen that trend over the years, and this is just another thing. When we come back, they're still searching for a new head of UNC, and there's still controversy. Our panel will discuss right after these messages.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
It's a fact. Patients who receive care in the medical home from a trusted family physician reduce healthcare costs through prevention, early detection, and affordable management of high-cost chronic diseases.
Every dollar invested in healthcare matters. Let's invest them wisely, building on North Carolina's medical home model. Better health begins with a medical home, a trusted family physician, the best return on our healthcare investment. Learn about the importance of medical homes at ournchealthcare.com.
You sleep on concrete till your body get immune to concrete.
My mom got my brother and I up and said, come on, we're leaving.
I became homeless in the beginning of this year.
When I was about 4 or 5 years old, our house caught fire.
I used to see my brother. If he see me, he'd turn and go the other direction.
We did the only thing that we could think of, and we went to a Salvation Army shelter.
You know, we don't have this, like, what's your background look like? We just say, what do you need?
I remember the man from the Salvation Army coming down with a box of clothes.
The Salvation Army officer bought my brother and I an ice cream cone.
Last week, my brother walked up to me, and he just started a conversation.
Today I've given my life to the Salvation Army because I remember what somebody did for me, my brother, and my mom over 30 years ago.
The Salvation Army for me means hope.
Compassion.
Family.
Support.
We now return to NC Spin.
Welcome back. Earlier this year, the UNC Board of Governors summarily fired President Tom Ross. A search committee was formed to try to find a new president, and now we keep hearing that the Board of Governors members that are not on that search committee are becoming frustrated because of a lack of information about the progress of the search, and there are even indications that friction within the board regarding the continued leadership of Chairman John Fenebrez. Now, Connie, by all accounts, the legislature this year favored UNC. They were funded fairly well. The bond has a lot of money in there for them. I mean, what are your thoughts on this sudden change in the legislature as far as the way they have approached UNC? And does the dismissal of Mr. Ross have anything to do with that?
The dismissal of Ross has nothing to do with the bonds. About every 10 years or so, there's a huge bond issue that seems to pop up. And these are items that can't be paid out of normal cash flow. There's always something else that's coming along. And so with lower interest rates, it only made sense that all the universities would pile on and try to figure out, you know, what are the most important projects. So when you start talking about $90 million for UNC Charlotte and all these other universities, this is normally what happens. It doesn't really matter what's going on politically over at the university system. It's just taking advantage and making sure that we have lower cost buildings long term and have buildings as our university system grows.
Rufus, there's no doubt that there's been a shift on that Board of Governors. I mean, how do you think that's going to play out in the search for a new president?
Well, I can see why people are sort of upset because about half of them are on, half of them are not on the search committee. And I would want to know if I were on the board, who have you got in mind? But they got to remember this. Nobody wants to come and say, I want to do a tryout for the president of UNC if you're going to put my name out there. And secondly, I I heard somewhere that there was some legislation drafted that did not get put in, that where they were going to meddle in the process. Now that disturbs me tremendously. I think there are a lot of good people on there, and I'll say one thing, Doug. I don't know how to say the chairman's name of the board. You said it, so I now know how to say it.
Well, that was going to be one of my suggestions. Whoever the new chairman of the board is has an easier name to pronounce for everybody who has to do it. John, you know, there is a movement nationwide for, if you want to call it thinking outside of the box, looking outside of academia for presidents. Do you think that when we finally get down to some of these candidates, we may see somebody, there's obviously going to be people from the academic world, but might we see somebody from more of a business background considered?
Of course, but let's remember that has not been atypical in North Carolina already. Erskine Bowles was not hired out of academia. Tom Ross was hired off of Davidson, but that had not been his career, was academia. He had been a judge. He had been in philanthropy. I guess who would be C.D. Spangler was a businessman from Charlotte. So
Bill Friday was not
well, he wasn't a professor, though he had worked in the university system. So I think that that particular rap is not a good one. That's more appropriate to when we're discussing chancellors. Should chancellors be only hired out of academia? They're more likely to be done that way. One of the things that Rufus mentioned about the legislation that might have changed the process, I would be in favor of more transparency here. This is a huge hire that has potential to affect North Carolina for years to come, expend billions of dollars. I think it's appropriate. You know, lots of school systems release the last 2 or 3 candidates for like superintendent and then interview them and then hire them. I don't think that it would be inappropriate. I still think we'd get plenty of good applicants if we had the finalists announced ahead of time, and so the public could have some sense of where this process was going.
Chris, while we're on the topic of the Board of Governors, there's been some discussion in the legislature of possibly limiting the length of the terms of the Board of Governors. Now, you know, put on your conspiracy hat. Do you think this is the Republicans trying to get rid of the last vestiges of the Democrats that are held over, or do you think this is just good practice?
Well, there are no Democrats. I mean, all 32 members of this Board of Governors were elected by the Republican General Assembly. 16 in 2000 this time, and 16 before that. They did pass a bill that limits the term, that they're limited to 2 consecutive terms now, but you can go back on the board if you've been on the board before. That's so it'll affect some of those people. Look, I think the problem here is that some leaders of the General Assembly understand this board is almost dysfunctional. And with all due respect to Chairman Fennebresque, who I know is a fine lawyer and I'm sure a nice guy, he has alienated a lot of people inside the board. He's alienated people at the legislature. His performance when he fired Tom Ross, whatever you think of the decision, I thought it was a mistake. Even if you supported it, was handled very poorly. Almost everybody on the board is in the dark. They feel like they're in the dark again. There's a big clamor for new leadership on the Board of Governors. I think that's why you saw the General Assembly think about meddling. I'm glad they didn't meddle, but I would not be surprised if there was a leadership change on the Board of Governors.
Well, my memory is sitting around this table when Mr. Ross was let go that we had unanimously agreed that it was not handled well, which is kind of rare for sometimes on this show. So that's the one thing I think the public is aware of his leadership style and may be critical. Now, when we come back, we're going to do one of the favorite parts of the show. Each one of the panelists are going to tell us something that we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Everyone, I'm Linda Loveland. If feeding your family safe, affordable foods is a priority for you, then join me in saying thanks to the North Carolina farmers who feed us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's say thanks to the farmers who feed your family at #ThankNCFarmers. To learn more about the foods we eat and the farm families who feed us, visit feedthedialoguenc.com. And be sure to thank North Carolina farmers.
Did you know that 1 in 4 Americans suffer from mental illness? The effects can be devastating. I should know. My father was Robin Williams. I miss my dad every day, but the Foundation of Hope gives hope to me and many others. Mental illness is treatable and will be beatable in our lifetime.
Join us on Sunday, October 11th for the annual Thad and Alice Yule Walk for Hope at the Angus Barn. Great food, prizes, and live music.
Remember, walking together, we are the hope.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State. a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
We now return to NC Spin.
Welcome back. One of the best parts of our show is when we ask the panelists to tell us something we don't know. They get to choose the topic and sound off for a few seconds. So we'll start with John Hood.
Doug, we talked earlier in the show about the bill that set North Carolina's presidential and other primaries at March 15th and how there was this other piece of it about political parties that was controversial. Well, one of the assumptions built into the bill was that North Carolina would join Florida and a number of other states, on that day Ohio, all with winner-take-all primaries. But the state Republican Party, the executive committee met over the last weekend, and apparently they've come out for proportional allocation of delegates. Their argument is this will make North Carolina a more attractive place for all the different candidates to go because they don't have to win to get delegates out of North Carolina. I'm not sure I'm quite there yet as thinking that. I think a lot of, by mid-March, I think candidates are looking for a knockout blow and going to try to win a lot of delegates at one swipe, but we'll see.
It was an important decision. And
it really was. And it was done by the party, which actually does appear to trump anything in the legislation.
And it wasn't very widely reported. Chris, tell us something we don't know.
One of the most interesting things I thought that happened at the end of the legislative session is Representative Paul Stam, who, by the way, announced he's not seeking re-election, which is an interesting story, tried to get more money for the Opportunity Scholarship or the voucher program through the House Appropriations Committee, and he failed. Not only did he fail, one of the members of the committee said he had recently visited a church school that was in the back of a church in a basement-type place with one or 1.5 teachers, 8 to 10 students, and he wouldn't send his kids there, wouldn't want taxpayer money to go there. The person who made that comment was Representative Leo Daughtry. Which is a surprise to some people. I think one of the big issues in the next couple of years will be the big, strong push for accountability in the voucher system. Whatever you think of the program, there are a lot of people on both sides that think we need more accountability in vouchers. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Connie, the floor is yours. Tell us something we don't know.
We hear about big issues passing, and what we don't hear a lot are who the champions are at the legislative level, because it takes who your primary bill sponsor is to make sure they pass. And I forecasted that the bombs would not pass this year, the General Assembly, and I was wrong, because there are 4 champions that popped up and really pushed them in the General Assembly. Representative John Torbett, Representative Dean Arp in the House, and in the Senate you had Senator Kathy Harrington and Senator Bill Raymond from Brunswick County. And those 4 people made a big difference in getting a bond and bonds that really weren't moving early in the session. I wasn't hearing good stuff at the building. They moved them along and got them passed.
Rufus, last but not least.
Well, I want to be mad about something. The legislature had the chance to save a lot of lives by passing a bill to make ignition interlock mandatory for those that consume alcohol. A lot of lives will be lost because drunk drivers can keep on doing what they do. The bill was introduced by bipartisan. There was some skullduggery somewhere to keep that bill from coming up because there's no reason why we should continue to allow drunks to kill people on the highways.
Exactly right. Well, you've heard and read the spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, and we welcome your feedback. And also to read Tom's weekly column, visit our website at ncspin.com. You can also catch NC Spin on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when NC Spin will have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.